Welcome to a new tier list. This time I decided to do a tier list of my console slash handheld collection and be precise on what tier I feel personally. Keep in mind, this is all subject to opinion, and that is it. With that said, music in the background is from Silent Hill 2. So with that said, total we have more stereotypical S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and D tier. Nothing, at least in my opinion, that at least is in my collection, I don't consider F tier. But I know I'm going to have a few hot takes here and there. So with that said, keep that in mind. I understand that my opinion is not going to be the most probably well received, at least on specific platforms. But with that said, yeah, tried to redo a little thing, and of course got here a little representation for the Wonder Swan. So with that said, first up I thought look at the games that I consider D tier, or rather consoles. With that said, total there are three that I consider D tier. Keep in mind that's based on my own personal experience of what titles I've played. Some of these I haven't played many games, and maybe that's why it's low ranked, so partially maybe against me. But with that said, D tier, the three are first up is the Game Boy Color slash Game Boy. For me is D tier, but that's because I didn't play the original Game Boy Color outside of maybe a couple of Pokemon games. I pretty much never played Game Boy Color. As of right now, I only have like two games on the Game Boy Color. So with that said, also I consider D tier, even though sadly I only have two games really based on. But for me, also in D tier is the Bandai Wonder Swan. Just because I haven't had enough overall experience, unfortunately, it being a Japanese only platform hurts it as pretty much any games I get basically. I'm gonna have to either find a translation or something else, unfortunately. Now, the real hot take is the third one I have at D tier, and that is the Nintendo Wii. Original Wii. Yes, I know. That's probably a hot take, having it so low compared to. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have the Wii pretty high up on their list. For me, I just don't like the overall motion controls in every way, which is one of the reasons that I didn't play a lot of Skyward Sword, even though I liked the game. Really, the only game I put myself through was a couple of games specifically on the Wii, and that's it. That got me to push myself through. That being Silent Hill, Shattered Memories, and also specifically Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And with that said, next we go to C tier. More down the middle, 50-50 for me. I consider it more or less average. I'm not sure what some people's opinions are. First up that I have on the C tier is the Sega Game Gear. Personally, I actually have more experience overall with the Game Gear than the actual Game Boy and Game Boy Color. I know that's probably weird for some people, I'm sure. I know I'm a very small or rather, it's a very small, minute group of people who actually grew up more playing Game Boy, or rather Game Gear, because it didn't have a huge amount of superb great games, sadly. But still, I enjoyed it for what it was, and arguably I did grow up as a Sega fan in the 90s, so consider a little bias and nostalgia is a heavy influence on it. For me, also at C tier is the Sega Master System, which was the first really worldwide released console, as the previous was only the SG-1000. Um, Now, with the Master System, it has some legit, really good, I think, Unreal shooter games at the time period, and a few great beat 'em ups, like specifically Double Dragon is one of the all-time classics. The Master System, also games like Space Harrier are other greats. The very first Phantasy Star game released on it. So yeah, I have definitely some fondness for the console again, like other things. Also on there, I don't really have nostalgia, but I actually really enjoy, I put it C tier, is the Panasonic 3DO. I'm not sure what some people's opinions are on the 3DO or how many really 3DO owners there are out there, but for me, 3DO is C tier. I actually think it's an okay console. Has some legit really good games like Samurai Showdown being one of the big ones, as well as like a Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Also, I put on there might be somewhat controversial at C tier, but the Nintendo 64 is C tier for me personally, even though there's definitely some big games that I really love on it. Specifically, games like, Ocarina of Time is an all-time classic, but Star Fox 64 holds a really big place for me, as well as WWF No Mercy, as well as WCW NWO Revenge, as well as Star Wars Rogue Squadron, and many other great games on the platform. But as time has gone, I feel the games have not aged as well as other consoles personally. With that said, now we move on to B tier, which I consider above average. Overall, we can give pretty positive for the most part. Now, the ones I want to mention first is the Super Famicom, aka Super Nintendo, for me is B tier. As it has gone lower over time, even though I do still look very fondly back at many games that I've played. But with that said, still, as time has gone on, I've come to appreciate other Nintendo platforms a little bit more. Though I still have a lot of deep fondness for things like Chrono Trigger, as well as Street Fighter 2 Turbo, or Killer Instinct 1, or many other games out there like Turtles in Time is another all-time classic, Super Punch-Out, Donkey Kong Country 2, and quite a few other games out there. But yeah, at the end of the day, still, it gets B tier for me. Also at there, I have to say, the Game Boy Advance, or GBA rather, for me is easily B tier. I definitely like it quite a bit. I wasn't as heavy into it at the time though, to be fair. I wasn't doing a lot of handheld gaming at that time period. And what I did was probably a little bit later on and more towards the PSP for me. Though I would end up being to the DS a little bit more than, but I still, looking back now, I look back at the GBA a little more fondly, and a few specific, in my opinion, some easily the best Pokemon games though are on GBA. Fire Red as well as Emerald, to name a couple of the really great ones. As well as you also have some great Zelda games specifically on that platform. But still, for me, it's B tier. Also, B tier is the Xbox One, a console that I think I like probably a little bit more than some people out there. I'm not sure what overall opinions are on specifically the Xbox One, but I still look at it pretty fondly as there are definitely some games I really love, specifically Sunset Overdrive being one of the biggies, as well as I would say of other specific games. I actually like Recore more than some people, and I miss things like Project Spark, but also, of course, Killer Instinct 2013 is a big reason that I love the console as much as I do. Also, I want to say though, at the time, it would drop a little in rank, but for me, also at B tier is the PSP, PlayStation Portable. I do look at this console very, very fondly, mostly because of Square Enix at the time had some great games. Heck, there was even a pretty solid Armored Core game on the PlayStation Portable, surprisingly, as well as Tekken Dark Resurrection, or Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max, and many others. But at the end of the day, nowadays, yeah, I put it at B tier. Now, with that said, let's go to A tier, which I look back very fondly, definitely having nostalgia involved also onward up. For me, at A tier is, first up, I want to mention the, you see right here, first on the A tier for me is the Neo Geo Pocket Color. is arguably, in my opinion, one of the absolute best handhelds, definitely of handhelds that were released in the 90s. It is by far the most superior out there, and it was easily the best handheld. Definitely of 2D games, especially with fighting games, because keep in mind we are talking about Neo Geo here, or rather SNK, which has got some incredible games like a great Fatal Fury. You have Samurai Showdown 2. You have also many other greats. I mean, King of Fighters. You even have a couple of crossover like Capcom SNK games, which are great, like Card the Battle. You even have Guild Fighters or Turf Masters or Sonic Adventures or Sonic, but as you will, Sonic Adventure. But it is great, seriously. If you get a chance, ever get a shot, seriously try out. The Neo Geo Pocket Color for me is amazing for its time. And I look back at it very fondly because of the quality titles it has. Also, A tier for me is the very first console I would ever play or own. Well, not play, but the first one I would ever actually own. For me, A tier also goes to the Sega Genesis. Big one as specifically for fighting games, and of course Sonic 2 being one of the greatest platformers of all time, let's be honest. As well as you also have incredible games like Comic Zone or Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, as well as a few other great games, of course, even though they were inferior overall. Still, I have a fondness for Fatal Fury. Also, don't want to forget Clay Fighter has a bit of nostalgia, as well as Fantasy Star 2 and 4 are big ones, as well as even a couple of Zelda-like games that I really like. Then I highly recommend for others to check out. Also at A tier is the Nintendo DS, arguably one of the best handhelds of all time. Even with the old, like the light model, you could also play backwards compatible with actual GBA games, but plays overall better. Plus, you have some seriously superb DS games, especially Mario 64 DS edition, which allowed you to play other characters, was great. Also, you had some really legit good Pokemon games of the time period, though sadly I currently do not have. Um, Definitely a few great Zelda games, and may I add, a few specific ones that I have a fondness for is the Kingdom Hearts games on DS, as well as a couple of Final Fantasy games, and also Golden Sun Dark Dawn, which is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated JRPGs on handheld, period. Also, I have to give A tier also to the Nintendo 3DS, though over time I think I've come to like it a little bit more than the actual DS because one, I love the remaster of the 3DS editions of Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask. This is like the definitive way to play it. Also, even want to mention Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon is a great game. Also, A Link Between Worlds is another superb. Of course, Star Fox 64 remastered. Also, Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. And also Monster Hunter Stories. There are quite a few superb games on the 3DS, as far as I'm concerned. Also, I have to give A tier to the Wii U. I know a lot of people probably think I'm bonkers giving the Wii U an A tier rank. That's because I have come to really appreciate the Wii U, and I like it a lot more than probably a huge amount of people out there. Giving I put it at A tier, yeah, I like it quite a bit, and I hold it in pretty high regard. Also, with that said, yeah, next I give A tier to the Saturn, mostly because of fighting games and also Panzer Dragoon games. Definitely immediately wins it over in my book. There's some superb great games, not just Virtual Fire, the Capcom. You have so many great Capcom fighters on it. You even have some great superb games from SNK as well, King of Fighters, as well as Samurai Showdown, as well as many other crazy games like Fighting Vipers and many others. And like I said, of course, also the pinnacle Panzer Dragoon Saga. But with that said, also at A tier for me is the PS2. I know a lot of people probably have PS2 at S tier, but for me it is sadly A tier. Doesn't get any higher. Though just barely not making S tier for me, also making A tier is the PS3. I like it just a little more than the PS2. For me, what puts the PS2 up so high is a lot of great fighting games, specifically Tekken Tag, Tekken 4, Tekken 5, also Street Fighter EX3, and many others out there. I just love that amount of great games. And of course, Silent Hill hit its golden age at this time period with Silent Hill 2, 3, For the Room, and of course also Shattered Memories. And many great Resident Evils like RE4 or Code Veronica X, as well as many others. So if you're a fighting game fan, or a platformer fan, or a sports fan, or a survival horror fan, PS2 had you set. I would say pretty much the same thing for PS3. Had some really great fighting games as well, and many great. This was really when I would start being introduced to some games in the indie scene. Specifically, Journey is one of the big ones that holds a special place for me personally. With that said, also A tier, rounding it up, the Xbox 360 gets A tier as well for me, as I have a lot of fondness specifically for Fable 2 and Fable 3, as well as the remaster of Halo 1, as well as Halo 3 ODST, or Halo Reach, or heck, the first Halo Wars. I mean, the 360 had some incredible games that were done by Microsoft. This was really when Microsoft was seen at all areas perfectly and producing a lot of good quality exclusives. Even the Orange Box from Valve, which gave you Team Fortress 2, or also Portal 1, or also included Half-Life 2, as well as the Left 4 Dead games would also be released, or let's argue one of probably the greatest games of all time was also released on it. Lost Odyssey, one of the greatest JRPGs of that generation. With that said, I give the final ace slot goes to the Nintendo GameCube. It is my favorite Nintendo console of all time, so just barely doesn't make S tier, but I love it nevertheless. The GameCube has a heavy amount of nostalgia for me, specifically Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil Remake, Resident Evil 4. Also, while you're at it, also Twilight Princess, Wind Waker being, of course, pretty much two of my top 3 favorite Zelda games of all time, as well as Pokemon Colosseum, and many other superb, and of course, Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem, one of the great survival horror games of all time. That's the thing, the GameCube was probably the best Nintendo console of all time as far as I'm concerned when it comes to actual horror games. It was definitely one of the most mature consoles overall at the time. For me though, now we go on to the final, S tier. And these are the ones that actually make it, in my opinion, at S tier supreme level. First up, maybe somewhat, I'm not sure what people's opinions are. For me, first up is the original Xbox. Yes, heavy nostalgia, as well as many great games came out. The fact, probably, I can name at least 10 to 12 great Star Wars games were released on it. Republic Commando, Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, as well as some of the Jedi Knight games, and many others. Definitely great games out there, and also can't forget some great. This was during the 3D era, which I like Mortal Kombat, Deadly Alliance, Deception, and Armageddon, as well as many great fighting games like Dead or Alive 3, Dead or Alive Ultimate Volumes 1 and 2, as well as games like Bloody Roar Extreme and many others. Then we go to the next I consider S tier, and that is the PlayStation 1. Big heavy nostalgia as it was my first PlayStation, obviously, like many people's, as well as many games like Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. While you're at it, also great games like Crash Bandicoot 2, Crash Bandicoot 3, or the Spyro series, Medieval, as well as a few less well-known platformers I really liked on it, like Jersey Devil is one of the big ones for me personally that I have a heavy nostalgia for, as well as some games like Echo Knight or Kingsfield, one of the first really big RPG titles done by, of course, the big juggernaut that is today, that being, of course, From Software. There's many other games, and of course Tekken 2 and Tekken 3, or Mortal Kombat 4, which I'm somewhat more fond of than most people, and many other great games like the Oddworld series. Then we look at the next S tier, is one of the more recent ones, the PS Vita. Yes, the Vita for me is S tier, is for me my favorite handheld of all time. Gravity Rush is one of the big reasons for me personally, but as well as many other great games like Soul Sacrifice. I mean, you have some superb Papers, Please, anyone? Or heck, you could even play the remastered God of War. You could play, of course, Uncharted Golden Abyss. You could play Silent Hill, Book of Memories, though I know that's not exactly a very well received game as it's more of a dungeon crawler than a traditional horror game. Nevertheless, I still like it for what it is. Also, you have great ports of fine games like Injustice, Gods Among Us, or like MK 2011, and many others out there. With that said, we get on to the last two that I consider S tier. Next up, the PS4. Arguably, for me, is golden because of all the great games that came out for it. Specifically, though, games like God of War Remake, as well as, can't forget, little games like, say, I would say, of course, I'm glad we got some remasters like Ultra Street Fighter 4, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. I know is a controversial game that I really like, and I'm fine with that. Marvel's Spider-Man, as well as Miles Morales, all great, superb, great single-player experiences, as well as many others out there. Also, I would say if you like just good old-fashioned action games, Devil May Cry 5 is another superb one. Also, the Legacy Collection for Mega Man X series, as well as the regular Mega Man Legacy series, Mega Man 11, as well as many others. There's a whole list. I could go on with PS4 titles that I really like, and this would be the console I've become a juggernaut fan and defender of indie games, especially on the PS4. But with that said, let's get on, last but not least, biggest nostalgia for me personally. Coming at number, or the last of the S tier for me personally, is the Sega Dreamcast. As a great amount of fondness, especially when it comes to fighting games. Street Fighter Alpha 3, Street Fighter 3 Double Impact, or while you're at it, Capcom vs. SNK 2, or how about Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2, or Project Justice, or Soul Calibur 1, or how about, I don't know, Crazy Taxi, or Jet Set Radio Future, aka Jet Grind Radio. Many of the greatest, I think, Nintendo games of all time came out on that platform, as well as some underrated horror games, specifically Blue Stinger is one of the big ones for me. And there are definitely some others out there, I would say real cult classics, like Giga Wing is one of the big ones of on-rail shooters. But when it comes down to it, the Dreamcast is just amazing and gorgeous looking games, as well as the beginning of the 3D era of Sonic, when Sonic 3D was actually good, like Sonic Adventures 1 and 2, as well as many other games out there. But sadly, it's becoming kind of insanely expensive to collect for nowadays, which sucks. But it's because of how hardcore the fan base of the Dreamcast actually is. Our fan base may not be huge, but it's very dedicated, and that is one thing you can also say about the Vita. Just like the Dreamcast, just like I would say the GameCube, or heck, even the Wii U, has very passionate fan bases. And that's the thing. A lot of other stuff was way more successful, but In my opinion, success doesn't always mean quality. But with that said, I'll see y'all next time. Stay safe, and tell me what are some of your tier rankings for consoles or slash handhelds that you have. With that said, I'll see y'all next time, and stay safe out there in YouTube land.